She was paying every month, no complaints. She gave up her freedom for her family. They promised that it was temporary, but on her birthday, she received a suitcase and an order to get out. What they didn't know was that she remembered everything. And now, the game will start all over again, only on her rules. Sometimes the quietest revenge is the most destructive. Part 1. Returning Home. My name is Anna, and for the past 2 years I have been living in my parents' house with my younger sister. No, it's not my choice. It all started right after I graduated from college. I got my first full-time job as a marketing assistant at a small IT company. The salary was low, but it was enough to rent a modest studio apartment on the outskirts of the city. It was far from ideal, a dripping faucet, creaking floors, and a heater that only worked if you hit it hard. But she was mine. My space. My order. My island of peace. I lived modestly. She cooked meals for the week on Sundays, stored groceries in old cans, and bought clothes only when the old ones were falling apart. The only luxury was Friday evening baths, hot water, candles, a book. My way of staying sane and reminding myself of what I'm trying for. I dreamed of saving up for a down payment on my own home. Everything was different at home. My 17-year-old sister Lily was a real princess. She was allowed to do everything. Mom admired every photo of her on Instagram. Dad gave her the car keys as soon as she blinked. Every time I came to Sunday dinner, Lily would arrange a fashion show. A new bag, new shoes, a new iPhone. Anna, look at my new Gucci, isn't it lovely? She beamed. Then she'd sneer, "Oh, isn't that the same sweater you had on Facebook 3 years ago?" I tried not to react, but I still felt like a stranger. But the parents didn't care. They smiled and kept silent. I consoled myself with the fact that I had real friends, my plans, and my savings. Then everything collapsed. At dinner, 2 weeks after my 25th birthday, I felt anxiety from the doorstep. Dad was silent. Mom looked tearful. For the first time, Lily wasn't bragging about shopping with her face buried in her phone. "Anna, we need to talk," Dad said. He lost his job. "I've worked in logistics for 30 years, and that's it. Dismissal without compensation." Mom hadn't worked for 10 years. And then they asked, "Could you come home and help us with the money? Otherwise, we won't be able to pay for Lily's tuition and keep the house." "How much do you need?" I asked, feeling my throat tighten. $1,800 a month, Dad replied. It was almost all my savings, but how could I refuse? I said yes. A week later, I moved out of the apartment, packing my dreams in boxes. She returned to the room that had already become Lily's dressing room. I slept on a creaking bed among other people's dresses. She consoled herself. "It's temporary. Dad will find a job. Everything will return to normal." I was so wrong. At first, the parents were grateful. Mom cooked my favorite dishes. Dad clapped on the shoulder. "You are our guardian angel." Even Lily thanked me somehow, but soon everything changed. The gratitude was gone. There were request money. Buy Lily's textbooks. Mom's card didn't work at the salon. Transfer $100. There's not enough for gas. I was losing money, energy, and time, and they acted like it was the norm. Part 2. The illusion of caring. 3 months have passed. I still lived in that room, which smelled of someone else's perfume and was half filled with Lily's things. The money was transferred every month, exactly $1,800 to Mom's card. My bank statement looked like a downward curve. Every month, minus, minus, minus. But Lily was enjoying life. She came with new sneakers, a new iPad, and makeup from brands I couldn't even afford to watch online. When I politely asked how she could afford all this, she just chuckled. Maybe you just don't know how to live properly, Anna. I tried to hold on. Dad finally got a job. We opened a bottle of cheap champagne and celebrated. I dared to ask, should I look for an apartment already? Dad hesitated. Mom looked away. You understand? She said. The salary's not the same as it was. It's still difficult for us. Just stay with us a little longer. Until the fall. I nodded. Autumn? Let it be autumn. The main thing is to find yourself again. But autumn came and went. But I stayed. The house no longer felt like home to me. It was a place where I worked, paid, helped, and more I felt like I was not noticed. Mom stopped cooking my favorite dishes. Now everything was for Lily. Quinoa salads, teriyaki chicken, rice with mango. When I once suggested making my favorite casserole, Mom snorted, "Who eats such things now?" Every evening I came home from work, tired and angry. I was staying in the office more and more often, pretending that I had an emergency. But really, I just didn't want to go home. Everything escalated one Friday night. I opened the door and saw Lily in the hallway with a suitcase. There were beach slippers, a hat, and sunscreen nearby. I asked, "Where are you going?" "On a weekend with friends in Miami. All you need is $700. "Can you take it off?" "Everything has already been paid, only I am left." I looked at her in shock. "Lily, I give almost all my money to your family. I don't have such sums for nothing. Maybe you should work part-time in the summer." She flushed. "So you feel sorry for your sister?" "You're a miser, Anna. You spend your whole life adding up pennies and you live like a grandmother in gray sweatshirts." I exploded. For the first time in all this time, I was screaming, loudly, with the anger that had been building up for years. "I work 50 hours a week, Lily. I deny myself everything. I give you almost $2,000 every month. Are you laughing at me and calling me a beggar?" Tears were coming, but I held back. But Lily started crying, loud, ostentatious. Mom and Dad ran together. "What did you do to your sister?" Mom hissed. "She demanded $700 from me." I shouted. "I just said I couldn't give it to you." "And she called me a miser." "Anna," Dad said, "we can't take your toxicity anymore. I felt betrayed. Right here in my own family. Not a word of thanks, no support, only reproaches and reproaches." Everything has changed since that night. Part 3. The house that wasn't a house. After that night, everything collapsed completely. A relationship that was once at least outwardly warm has turned into an icy void. My parents and I hardly talked. My sister pretended to be an offended victim and walked past me without looking into my eyes. Mom cooked only for herself and Lily. My portions are gone. My favorite foods have disappeared from the fridge. Someone put my cups and plates in a higher cupboard so that I wouldn't get in the way. In the kitchen, I felt like a guest who was given to understand that he was late. But the money kept going. Exactly $1,800 every month. Even when my mom stopped saying thank you. Even when Dad stopped responding to my good morning. Even when Lily, loudly all over the house, called me a hanger-on who lives with her parents at 27. I started writing it down. Everything. How much I spent. What products I bought. How much I transferred. It was important for me not to forget. Not to forgive. I came home late one night. It was a grueling day. The project at work was urgent, and I spent almost 11 hours on it. All I dreamed of was a hot bath and silence. But someone was already sitting in the bathroom. The door was closed, music was playing from inside, Lily's laughter, and a friend she had brought back without permission. I knocked. Softly. How much longer? I asked. Jesus, Anna, can you relax for a minute? Lily shouted. Go sit somewhere else. We're making masks here. I sank to the floor in the hallway, tired, devastated, unhappy. It wasn't a house. It was a place where I was used. A week later, during the usual Sunday dinner, which had long since ceased to be a warm family ritual, Mom announced, We're going on vacation. I looked up from my dry chicken. We? I asked. What do you mean? Everything. Mom smiled. Dad, Lily, and I. You're working anyway. You'll be bored. I sat in a daze. They were leaving at my expense. I paid for their comfort, and I wasn't even invited. To Cancun, Lily added, munching on a salad. Everything is included. 5 stars. I hope they have a proper bathroom. And they all laughed. I felt like I'd been hit. Laughter, their laughter, and I'm just a wallet, shadow, the staff. I didn't say a word. I just got up from the table. I didn't sleep that night. I've been thinking about everything. She counted the steps. I didn't want to leave in poverty. I didn't want to run away in a hurry. But I realized the main thing. I don't live here anymore. I'm a prisoner. And I was going to get out. Since then, I've been preparing the ground. Slowly. I've changed the passwords for all my accounts. Opened a new bank account. I started saving for him everything that was left after the transfer to the family. I was looking for a place to live. Cheap, removable, whatever. The main thing is not to be a part of this absurdity anymore. And then it was my birthday. 28 years old. I came home from work early because the boss let me go, saying, You deserve at least a piece of cake, Anna. I bought a cake. Small, chocolate, with the inscription, For the most persistent girl. When I went home, no one paid any attention. Lily's suitcase was in the hallway. They were going to leave for Cancun tomorrow. There was a surprise waiting for me in the living room. There was a neatly wrapped gift on the table. I was glad, naive. Hope flared up again. Maybe they finally understood. Maybe you remembered? Happy birthday, Anna, Mom said, deliberately cheerful. Open it. I opened it. There was a suitcase inside, new, expensive, with a tag. My eyes widened. She turned to them. Is that... It's time for you to move on, Dad said, grinning. Yes, Lily added. Clear the room. I'm going to turn it into a dressing room again. A new suitcase and an old truth. I stood holding a suitcase in my hands, which symbolized not caring, but final exile. It wasn't a gift. It was a declaration. They didn't need me anymore. Or worse, they no longer pretended to be in need, and they were no longer going to hide their contempt under the mask of family warmth. Mom was looking at me with a tight smile. Lily was flipping through her phone, and Dad leaned back in his chair and took a sip of wine. We think it's time for you to get out of our house, he said calmly, as if he were talking about replacing a light bulb. You're an adult, Anna, independent. We'll manage on our own. I swallowed, not out of fear, not out of pain. It was the anger that was burning inside me like a fire. Everything I've done. All the nights I denied myself even yogurt, just to send them the damn $1,800. All the weekends spent working part-time, all the humiliation that I swallowed in the hope that it was temporary. And now, I'm just being kicked out, with a slight smile. And the money? I asked coldly. Which I've been translating for you for 2 years. $43,200. Mom's lip curled. We didn't ask for it. You suggested it yourself, out of kindness. And now this kindness is no longer needed, right? Dad shrugged his shoulders. You lived with us for free. She ate our food. I used hot water. We could rent this room out. Lily grinned at him. or use it for its intended purpose, for normal people's stuff. I slowly put the suitcase on the floor. My heart was beating steadily. I knew this was the end, but it's not the end of my journey. It's the end of their illusion. The illusion that I'll be there forever, that I will pay, be silent, suffer, and be grateful. I'll leave. Tomorrow. But before I do, I want to clarify something, I said, looking into the eyes of each of them. You are not a family. You are parasites. You deserve neither respect nor forgiveness, and you'll regret it. I didn't cry that night. I started writing every penny I've sent, every date. I've collected the bank statements. I photographed the receipts that are still preserved. I printed out the transfer confirmations. I've been getting ready. Not for battle, but for liberation. The next morning, while they were still sleeping, I called a taxi, loaded my suitcase and 2 boxes of things, all that was left of my former life, and left. I rented a cheap room on the outskirts of the city, without a kitchen, with a shared bathroom. But it was quiet there. Lily wasn't there. There was no mom's contempt. There was no cold father's voice. I was breathing there. A month has passed. I've been working like crazy. I took extra shifts. I've been applying for promotions, studied financial planning. I opened an account with another bank. I transferred everything that was left there. And then I got a letter, present on paper, from a lawyer. My parents demanded it. Compensation. $24,000 for accommodation, for utility services, for the use of common property. I laughed loudly, sincerely. They decided to sue me. I immediately called my friend James. He was a lawyer who I studied with at the university. I haven't seen him in 5 years, but I've kept his number. Hey, James, do you remember me? Anna? Sure. You were in a marketing course and I was in law school. What happened? I have a family situation, and it seems like it's going to be fun. At the meeting in the cafe, I showed him all the documents. It's not even funny, he said, flipping through the papers. You have all the evidence, all transfers, and did they actually file a claim? Here's the letter. Great, I'll write a reply. Official, and I will send it from my company. Is free. Thank you, James. He smiled. You know, Anna, sometimes family is just biology. Real connections are about respect, and you don't have to be an ATM for people who ignore it. A week later, my parents received a reply letter. Legally executed, cold and annihilating. Everything was there. Transfer amounts, confirmations, the threat of a counterclaim, emotional damage, financial damage, violation of the agreement, even a hint of blackmail. 3 days later, they withdrew the claim, and they haven't written since. Freedom is more precious than family. There was silence after that letter. Absolutely. No calls, no letters, no plaintive messages. They disappeared as if they had never existed. I could feel the emptiness. I could have been sorry, but no, I just felt light and confident. Now I knew I could protect myself. I rented a studio, small but cozy. The kitchen is in full view, 1 room, white walls. I bought used furniture, a table, a chair, a sofa, a closet. And she did something she hadn't done in years. She hung her picture on the wall. The one where I smile, standing on top of a hill, the wind playing with my hair. I've regained my space again. I started dreaming again. I've made a new budget, without mandatory transfers to the family. For the first time in a long time, I allowed myself a cup of coffee to take away. Then there's the gym membership, then a massage. Everything was a little bit different, carefully, but I was learning to live anew. I got a promotion a couple of months later. The boss called me into the office and said, Anna, you are one of the most reliable employees. I've noticed how invested you are. Here is your new agreement. We are increasing your salary by 20%. I left the office and for the first time allowed myself to cry, not out of resentment, from relief. My life started coming back to me. 6 months after moving in, I bought myself a new suitcase. It cost almost like half of my last rental. What for? Just because I could. Because I wanted to. Because now I made every decision for myself and only for myself. That day, I allowed myself to go on a short trip. To the next town, for no reason. Without responsibilities. I was sitting on the train, drinking coffee and looking out the window. People were passing by. The world was living its own life, and I was finally living mine too. On my 28th birthday, I didn't expect miracles, but I got a gift from myself. I went to the website of the state program for the first housing and sent an application. 2 months later, my mortgage was approved. I signed the documents and moved into my apartment. It was small, with one bedroom, but with its own windows, its own balcony, and his silence. When I opened the door to my apartment on the first evening, I carried the keys in my hands, which no one would have to return. It was a moment of real victory. And the family? Oh, I've heard something through distant relatives. Dad was out of work again. Lily dropped out of college and started a fashion blog. Mom fell ill with overprotective behavior and now goes to friends complaining about how an ungrateful daughter left them in trouble. My childhood neighbor even wrote to me. She said she saw Lily working part-time at the cash register, wearing expensive sneakers and pouting lips. The world began to put everything in its place. They were at the point they started from. But I'm not. One day I found a letter in my mailbox, without a return address. I recognized my mother's handwriting, a neatly folded piece of paper. Anna, you've always been smart. We were wrong. We're sorry. Dad is sick. Lily lost herself. Please forgive me. Help. We need you. I didn't cry. She wasn't shaking. I didn't doubt it. I tore the letter in half and threw it away. Because I also needed a family once. I also wrote with eyes full of hope. I also prayed with my eyes that they would hear me. But they chose to laugh. I chose to live. Now every morning when I wake up, I pour myself a cup of coffee, open the balcony, look outside and tell myself, you've been through this. You're not a victim anymore. You are a victory. And this, believe me, is the best revenge. Part 6. When the past knocks on the door. It's been a few months since I received that letter from my mom. I didn't think about them anymore. I didn't check social media. I didn't ask my friends. I let go. But the past doesn't always go away quietly. One Sunday, when I was returning with groceries, he was standing at the door of my apartment. My father. He was gray-haired, thinner, in a rumpled coat with a faded look. He didn't say hi or how are you. He just stood there as if he was afraid I'd slam the door in his face. I was silent. Everything inside me was filled with anger, pain, and memories. I didn't come to ask for money, he said. Just listen. I put the bags on the floor and crossed my arms over my chest, not letting him in. We thought you'd always be there for us, he began. We're used to you dragging your feet. It was convenient, easy, and unfair. We didn't realize you were an adult, that you don't have to be our insurance. He spoke softly, almost in a whisper. I didn't interrupt. It didn't hurt. I was strange. It was like I was looking at everything from the outside. Lily's gone, he said. I rented an apartment with some guy. We hardly talk anymore. Your mom blames herself. But more than that, he blames you. Although he knows you were right. And why did you come? I asked without changing my tone. To tell you. Thank you. I blinked. He looked into my eyes and exhaled. If you hadn't left, we would never have realized what we were losing. Thank you for choosing yourself. Thank you for showing me how to do this. He held out his hand. I didn't take it. I hope you'll find the strength to forgive us someday, he said, and left. I stood at the door for a few more minutes. Then she picked up the bags, went inside, and closed the door. It wasn't the end. It was a reinvention. The next day, a new employee, Sarah, came to work. He's a couple of years younger than me. Smart, fast, with that sparkle in her eyes that happens to those who still believe that the system is honest. I saw myself in it 5 years ago. At lunch, she asked me, "How are you so calm? You're always so collected. Is everything okay with you?" I chuckled. Everything was wrong with me until I realized that I had the right to choose myself. She paused, as if she'd memorized it for the rest of her life. Winter has passed, spring has arrived. I started writing, not on the blog, not on a social network, for myself. It's just that every morning before work, I opened my laptop and wrote down how the day went, how I felt, what I dreamed about. It became my therapy. Sometimes episodes from those 2 years in my parents' house came up that made me shudder. But I kept writing, not stopping. It was like squeezing poison out of a wound. I went to the seaside for my birthday. 1. I rented a small house by the water, bought myself a cake, a bottle of wine, and spent the evening in silence. Looking at the horizon, I thought, I don't need to prove anything anymore. One day I received a letter from Lily. "Anna, I know that you probably won't open this letter, but if you do, just know that I've learned a lot. I was jealous of you, always, for your strength, for your independence. I was always trying to prove that I was better than you because I didn't feel like I was worth anything. I apologize not for everything that happened, but for being blind to you as a person. You deserve to be loved, one where you're not being used, the kind you probably once wanted from us. Thank you for being kind no matter what. L." I reread the letter twice. Then I put it in a drawer. I didn't know if I would ever forgive them, but for the first time, I didn't feel angry. Just adulthood. A year later, I sat in a chair in front of the mirror with a new stylist. My hair got longer. There is confidence in the eyes. "How to get a haircut?" "What is it?" she asked. "So that you can see that I know how to set boundaries," I replied and smiled. Part 7. Not a drop back. It's been almost 2 years since I left my parents. Everything has changed. New job, new apartment, new habits. I stopped being afraid of weekends. I no longer woke up worried that someone would demand help, money, attention, and strength from me again. I realized that my life no longer belongs to others. I belong to myself. But the past still comes back. Sometimes it's through other people's stories. At a corporate meeting of the marketing department, I met a girl named Emma. She was new, came to the neighboring department, bright, with a great sense of humor, with a quick mind. We started talking and started having lunch together. At some point, she trusted. I just recently moved out from my parents. It was almost the same story as yours. Senior, reliable, support. She pulled everyone on herself until I realized that they were just using it. I nodded. "How many years have you been trying to earn love?" I asked. "Oh, at least 10, Emma grinned. "And now?" "And now I like myself. Even when I cry in the bathroom. Because I know these are my tears. Not from anyone's expectations." We became close. It's amazing how quickly souls can connect if they've followed a similar path. I found an old notebook. Between the pages is a note that I once wrote to myself. "You're strong. You will survive. You will become the kind of woman that others look up to. Just don't betray yourself." I burst into tears, not from pain, but from pride. One gray autumn evening, I got a call from an unknown number. I don't usually pick up the phone, but this time something jerked inside. I replied, "Hi, Anna. This is Lily." The voice wasn't the same as I remembered it. Software tired. "I've been planning for a long time. I just wanted to tell you. I'm pregnant." I sat down on the couch. There was no anger or joy in my chest. Just a pause. Congratulations, I replied calmly. Thanks. It's not from the guy I moved out with back then. Everything went wrong. I'm alone now, and I'm not asking for anything. Simply, I was scared. It's scary that I might repeat my mother's mistakes. I was silent. I remember how we laughed at your sweaters, she continued, and now I dream of being like you for a day. Calm, strong, no lies. Lily, I finally said, if you want, we can talk. But I'm not going back to my old role anymore. I don't sacrifice myself. Not a drop. She sobbed, and for the first time in all this time, I heard in her voice not fake, not manipulation, but real confusion. I do not know how to get better. Start with honesty, I said, for myself. A week later, she invited me for coffee. I doubted it. My stomach clenched at the risk of being trapped again. But I went. We were sitting in a small cafe near the park. Lily was almost unrecognizable. Without makeup, in a simple coat. There was no longer that cocky sparkle in her eyes. I hurt you, she said, more than I realized. Then it seemed to me that everything was right, that if I am the youngest, then I should be allowed more. But now I understand. I was just being selfish, and I want to apologize. I looked at her and felt the old image crumbling inside. It won't fix the past, I replied, but maybe it will give you a chance for something new. She nodded. I'm not asking you to forget. Just don't reject it forever. It all depends on what you do next, I said. Not from me. Later at home, I wrote in my notebook, forgiveness is not weakness. This is not a return pass. It's just freedom from anger. I didn't know if I'd ever be close to Lily, but I knew for sure that I would not return to this story as a victim. Now, I'm the one who writes the rules. Part 8. The New Order. After talking to Lily, I sat by the window with a cup of tea for a long time. The city behind the glass was still noisy, nervous, in a hurry, but I felt that a quiet restructuring had begun inside me. Not forgiveness, no, liberation. I suddenly realized that I no longer think about my family with pain. I think with caution. I've learned to set boundaries. And when Lily said, I do not know how to get better, was not her question to me. It was her question to herself, and she has to find the answer on her own. Things were going well at work. After the last presentation I made to the board of directors, I was offered to lead a new project. Big. Strategic, with a bonus. Can you handle it? The boss asked. I chuckled. I've been carrying an entire family for 2 years. The project is a vacation. Everyone laughed, and I realized that for the first time I was talking about this past not with pain, but as a fact. It was. It's not me right now. A couple of months later, I received another message. This time from his mother. She sent me a picture of Lily with the baby. The signature was short. I know that we don't deserve your forgiveness, but I hope that one day you will be able to hug your niece. I looked at the photo for a long time. The baby was tiny, with tiny hands and a surprised look that was so pure. I didn't answer. Not because I didn't care, but because such decisions are not made in a second. I went to the sea. One. The only time. I rented a room in a modest hotel facing the coast. The storm was crashing waves on rocks. The wind was ruffling my hair. Seagulls were screaming. And in all of this, I suddenly felt, yes, I can close that chapter. Don't forget. But let it go. To leave on these stones everything that was pulling down. I took a piece of paper and wrote, it's not your fault that you were needed. But it's your fault if you stay where they don't like you, and crumpled it up. It was blown away. That's how I imagined how something that no longer belongs to me should disappear. When I returned, I put a new chest of drawers at home. For the first time, I allowed myself furniture not from a flea market, but the one that I chose myself, brand new, with glass handles. It was my act of symbolic renewal, a new box for a new life. Lily wrote again a few weeks later, without asking, without crying. Just a photo, a baby in pink, sleeping on her chest. Signature, I named her Anna, in your honor, because if she grows even a quarter as strong, she will succeed. I've been looking at this message for a long time, and for the first time in all this time, I wanted to smile. The bitterness is gone. There was a restrained, calm pride. I received a postcard for my birthday from Lily. It's paper with real handwriting, without embellishment. I know I don't deserve your kindness, but if you ever want to be there for me, not for me, but for a girl who hasn't learned to be afraid yet, you'll always be an example to her. Not like an aunt, and as a woman who chose herself when everyone was calling to the abyss. I was crying, not from the pain, because maybe my choice gave someone a chance not to repeat my mistake. The past does not go away without a trace. It remains, but not as a steering wheel, but as a background. The road that you walked barefoot so that you would never step on your throat again. I lived a different life now, not for the sake of other people's needs, not out of guilt. I woke up in the morning, looked at myself in the mirror, and didn't look away. I was just me. Part 9. More than justice. A few more months passed. The work was progressing. I was invited to speak at a professional conference in a neighboring state. I had to tell them how to manage the team and not lose myself. It's funny, I've been losing myself in my family for so many years, so now I have to teach others not to let it happen. Before leaving, I decided to put the drawers in order. I found an old folder with bank transfer statements among the papers. All the $1,800 that I had been transferring to my parents for almost 2 years. I took out a calculator. $43,200. On Lily's clothes, to their restaurants, on vacation to Mexico, everyone except me. I was sitting with this amount in my hands. There was no tragedy in it. There was arithmetic. And the question is, should I put a period or an ellipsis? The next day, I called James, the lawyer friend. We met in a cafe, just like when he helped me fend off my parents' false claim. He poured himself a cup of coffee and squinted at it. You look calm, you know. It's good. So whatever you have in mind is a balanced decision? I nodded. I don't want revenge, but I want them to understand, not at the emotional level, and in the language they chose themselves. Money. He chuckled. And you want to file a lawsuit? Yes. I transferred them $43,200. They promised to return it as soon as my father gets back on his feet. We have correspondence. There are witnesses. My former roommate, to whom I told everything at the time. There are even voice messages from Mom. They promised. And then they kicked me out into the street. James leaned forward and began making notes in his notebook. We won't call it revenge, we'll call it repayment. If they decide to fight, there will be a trial. If they realize that they are right, there will be an agreement. 2 weeks have passed. My parents received an official letter demanding a refund. I expected a strong reaction, but all was silence. Until one evening, the phone rang. Mother's number. I didn't answer. A voice message will be sent in a minute. How could you? We are your family, and you make us so. I erased it. The second message is from my father. Angry tone, accusations, deleted. The third is Lily, not a voice, just a text. Did you really decide to go all the way? Even now? I didn't answer, because now is when I have a choice. But then there wasn't. A month later, a reply came from their lawyer. At first, it was a refusal, then an attempt to negotiate. They offered $10,000 in installments. We refused. James said, "We can drag it out. The court will take your side, but you'll have to go through them again. Are you sure?" I've been thinking for a long time. Not about the money, about me. "Yes," I replied, "because I don't want to live with the feeling that my silence is consent." The trial lasted 2 months. The parents looked different. Tired, gray-haired, almost pathetic. They tried to pretend that everything was out of love, family obligations, and trust. But the judge was looking at the numbers, the facts. The solution was short. Return the $43,200 within 6 months, or the property will be seized. I wasn't happy. I just felt that justice is not always a loud cry. Sometimes it's just a signed and stamped document. And a void that I don't want to return to. On the day the first payment arrived, $7,200, I transferred $500 to a charity fund that helps girls who have become addicted to domestic violence. I saved the rest for the mortgage. I didn't feel any pain with this transfer. I felt the order. New, my. P Part 10. My house. My rules. The house I moved into a month and a half after the court decision was completely different from the places I had lived in before. It wasn't an apartment with old pipes or a temporary corner or my parents' house where I was reminded that I was a guest. It was my home. It was small with one bedroom, but with a private balcony in a quiet neighborhood, with neighbors who smiled but didn't pry into the personal. I painted the walls the color of warm sand and hung a sign in the hallway. "You're safe here. You're safe here." I didn't put it on for the guests, but for myself. Every time I went inside, I wanted to remember, I no longer live in fear that one day they will tell me to pack your bags. I didn't sleep the first night in the house, not because she was afraid or worried, but because I couldn't believe it. I turned on the music, put out the boxes, made tea, and just sat on the floor looking out the window. It finally dawned on me, I'm free. I am the mistress of my own life. My father wrote to me 2 months after the first court payment. Not directly, through a mutual acquaintance. The message was dry. "We believe that this was enough. Let's leave it at that. You've already retaliated." I didn't answer, because it wasn't revenge. It was the border. Clear, legal, it's human. But Lily didn't give up so easily. She sent a voice message via a new email. "Have you ever considered forgiving? Maybe I was spoiled, but I thought we were sisters anyway. And you made a war out of it. We're nothing to each other now, right?" I erased it, not because it didn't touch me, but because I knew that if I answered, I would get involved in the old game again, where I save, sacrifice, explain. And I have nothing more to explain. My home has become my island. I was setting it up slowly. Every shelf, every mug was bought not because it was necessary, but because I wanted to. The books on the shelves were not about survival, but about how to live. I bought myself an armchair where I could sit in the evenings and watch old movies. And then, 6 months later, I received something I hadn't expected at all. A letter from my mother. Present. Paper. In the envelope. I opened it with trembling hands. There were only a few lines inside. "Anna, we were wrong and they realized it too late. It hurts us, and we probably don't deserve to be forgiven. But you deserve to know that we're sorry. Mom." I sat with this letter for about 20 minutes. Then she folded it carefully and put it in a drawer. I didn't cry. I didn't write back. Because even sincere regret is not always a reason to come back. Especially when you've been moving towards your own life for so long. Today is exactly 1 year since the day I left their house with a new suitcase and old scars. I haven't become a different person this year. I'm still Anna, but Anna who knows the boundaries, which no longer lends itself to your family, which does not confuse love with duty. I found the job of my dreams. I'm not afraid of Mondays anymore. I've got someone who doesn't require me to save. He's just there. And that's enough. Sometimes in the evenings, I read old diary entries so that I don't forget what I went through. I read and smile. Because despite everything, I got out. And now I live by one rule. No one has the right to use your love as an excuse to take away your freedom. It's been a little over a year since I left my parents' house. My new path wasn't fabulous or smooth, but every obstacle made me stronger. And now, when I look at myself in the mirror, I no longer see that girl who quietly swallowed her grievances, sacrificing her dreams for the sake of other people's whims. Now I see a woman who chose herself and didn't regret it. My career continued to grow. After I was promoted, I was assigned an important project with an international client, and I did better than expected. After a couple of months, even those colleagues who had barely noticed my presence before began to listen to me. And when my boss once said at a general meeting, Anna is one of the most reliable and strategically minded employees of our company, I almost burst into tears. Not from pain, but from relief. They saw me. I was appreciated. And not for how much money I bring to someone else's house, but for who I am. I continued to live economically, but no longer out of fear of losing everything, but because I no longer needed to buy someone else's approval. I've been saving up, wisely, methodically, and when the bank approved my mortgage loan, I was sitting on the floor in my new apartment with a cup of cheap coffee and felt richer than ever. The house was small but sunny. There was no scream in it. There were no expectations. There was no eternal whispering behind my back. Just silence, bookshelves, the scent of candles and walls that were just mine. I went there every night knowing that no one would take that freedom away from me. But life likes to test even the most determined. One evening, almost a year and a half after that suitcase day, I was returning home after meeting with a lawyer friend with whom we were discussing launching a small podcast project. We were walking through the park, laughing, and suddenly I saw a familiar figure on a bench by the fountain. Mom. Tired, gray-haired, wearing a coat that probably used to belong to me. She looked up, noticed me, and stood up abruptly. Our eyes met, and I saw in her not the woman who handed me the suitcase, but a person who now did not know how to apologize. Anna, her voice was trembling. You look good. I nodded. Thanks. There was a pause. My father and I, she swallowed, we're still trying to get out. Lily got a job at a cafe, but she's suffering a lot. You know how she dreamed of becoming a photographer? I was silent, not because I wanted to humiliate her with silence, but because I didn't see the point in this conversation. We were thinking, she continued, if you could, just for a while, maybe help with a loan for the house. I inhaled slowly. Mom, I said calmly, I've already helped. 2 years. You threw it away. I'm building my life now. And you are no longer the main characters in it. She looked away. I felt sorry for her, but not enough to betray myself again. We were wrong, she whispered. I nodded. It happens. The main thing is to admit it to yourself, and not just in front of me. Then I turned around and left, without anger, without hysteria, just with the certainty that I no longer need anyone's permission to be free. That evening at home, I lit a candle, poured myself a glass of wine, and opened my laptop. There was a letter from the editor of the podcast platform. Our pilot release has already garnered over 10,000 auditions. People were interested in listening to women tell their stories of growing up, betrayal, and recovery. I clicked reply and wrote, "Thank you." The second episode will be called The Birthday Suitcase. I think you'll appreciate it. I smiled. This story might have started with pain, but it ended with power. And that was my real revenge.